Welcome back again to our ongoing series about the glories of Vrindavan and many of the great acharyas who spent time there. Well, it's almost 1 year now we've been giving these lectures by Prabhupada's grace. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarane. All glories to Prabhupada. So, today I would like to speak about another Babaji. Perhaps a lesser known personality in our Gaudiya Vaisnava tradition, but certainly someone no less important. And that is Srila Vamsidas Babaji. Some of you may have heard about him. I think a lot of you haven't heard about him, but he's a very important acharya. Vamsidas Babaji was a Gaudiya Vaisnava saint in the disciplic succession of Srila Narottam Das Thakur, who lived during the time of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, both of whom highly respected Vamsidas Babaji. Our annual ISKCON calendar marks his disappearance day each year, an event like all occasions on our calendar that should be acknowledged and observed. So it's a great honor for me today to share with all of you the glories of this great devotee. I used a number of sources for this class today, including a book about Vamsidas Babaji by my dear godbrother Bhakti Vikash Swami. Much of the credit goes to him and his team for their extensive research on this matter. And in his book, Maharaj gives credit to a disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati named Jati Shekhar Das for a booklet that he had written in the Oriya language about Vamsidas Babaji. So, I first heard of Vamsidas Babaji in a lecture Srila Prabhupada gave at a deity installation in Los Angeles on July 16th, 1969. I was listening to the recording. And in that lecture, Prabhupada says, and I quote, "If you think this deity is a brass-made idol, then it will remain a brass-made idol to you forever. But if you elevate yourself to a higher platform of Krishna consciousness, then Krishna, this Krishna, will talk with you. This Krishna will talk with you." There is a Vamsidas Babaji Maharaj. He was talking with his deity. As Prabhupada said, there is a Vamsidas Babaji Maharaj. He was speaking with his deity. So later I learned more about Vamsidas Babaji when listening to a morning walk conversation with Srila Prabhupada that was recorded in Mayapur on March 13th, 1976. And Prabhupada, in the midst of that walk, he says to the disciples, "You've heard the name Vamsidas Babaji?" And he pauses, then he says, "So sometimes when his things were stolen, his disciples would cry that, 'Oh, these things are stolen.' So Vamsidas Babaji said," Prabhupada's quoting him, "Why are you bothering? One thief gives, another thief takes. That's all. Who gave the money, he is also a thief. And who has taken away, he is also a thief. So why are you bothering?" Unquote. So there Prabhupada's, again referring to this great saintly personality. And I mentioned that Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, he had great respect for Vamsidas Babaji. Actually, as sadhus often do, they have great respect for each other and their relationships. So Babaji Maharaj, he was affectionately called by his followers sometimes Babaji Maharaj. He would sometimes refer to Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati as Jagannath there Bhimala. It's kind of an affectionate nickname he had for him. Jagannath there Bhimala. Because when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when he was younger, his name was Bhimala Prasad, which means, quote, a son born by the mercy of Bhimala Devi. Now, the deity of Durga in the Jagannath temple in Puri is called Bhimala Devi. You know. So apparently Bhaktivinoda Thakur and his wife, they named Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Initially they gave him that name Bhimala Prasad. So Babaji Maharaj, Vamsidas Babaji, he would sometimes call Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, oh, Jagannath there, Bhimala, some affectionate term. And when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati would sometimes visit Vamsidas Babaji at his bhajan kutir and when he was staying in Navadwip, when Vamsidas Babaji saw Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati coming, he would say, oh, a manjari has come. So will Radha come as well? She will come. She will come. He was referring to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati as being a manjari. So when visiting Babaji Maharaj with his disciples, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati would often tell them to be very careful not to make the offense of misunderstanding Vamsidas Babaji's, quote, wild appearance and eccentric behavior. We'll hear about that today. Actually, it's well known that Vamsidas Babaji's practice of Krishna consciousness was unorthodox. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati confirmed on a number of occasions that Babaji Maharaj's behavior corresponded with that of a topmost devotee of the Lord, a Paramahamsa devotee. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has explained that this Paramahamsa behavior, he describes it in his book, Aishvarya Kandambini. He writes there that devotees on the highest level of devotional service, quote, do not want any restrictions on their free-flowing offering of spontaneous love to Krishna. That's an important statement. These type of devotees, these very elevated devotees, they do not want any restrictions on their free-flowing offering of spontaneous love for Krishna. You could say due to their deep and unadulterated love for the Lord, these Paramahamsa, Vaishnavas, they never forget Krishna even for a moment, even when they're asleep. Just like I've said many times, one time Prabhupada said, in my life I never knew what was sinful activity, and I never for a moment forgot the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna. It said there's two ways that you can never forget a person, if you hate them or you love them. This is especially true with divine love for the divine couple. So these devotees on that level, they have this spontaneous love for Krishna. They don't have to follow all the rules and regulations that we follow as aspiring devotees. We're following these rules and regulations to avoid sinful activity, to avoid sense gratification, and we engage in regulated devotional services so that we can cleanse the heart of all unwanted things and gradually awaken our love for the Lord. And we come to that stage of spontaneous love through regulated devotional service. But they're already there. They don't have to follow these rules. They don't, you could say they don't have to chant any fixed number of mantras. They don't even have to have japa mala. They don't have to wear tilak on 12 different parts of their body. They don't have to get up in the morning for Mangal Artik. They don't have to follow regulated daily programs of sadhana. It's not so difficult for us to understand if we think about the residents of Goloka Vrindavan. They don't chant a fixed number of rounds every day. They don't get up for Mangal Artik. They don't mark their bodies, specifically in places with tilak and attend Bhagavatam class. There's no need for them to become Krishna conscious because they're nitya siddhas, they're eternal lovers of Krishna. So when we're speaking today about Vamsidas Babaji, his behavior seems unorthodox, but think of him like that. He's a spontaneous lover of Krishna. Think of him like a resident in Goloka Vrindavan, but he's in this world, so he kind of stands out, even amongst us devotees who are practicing sadhana bhakti. Of course, this very elevated stage of Krishna consciousness, which is rarely attained, we should say that it should not be imitated. Actually, in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami gives a warning. Shruti Smriti Puranati Pancharatra Vidam Vina Aikantike Harir Bhaktir Utpata Yaiva Kalpate. Very important verse for us. Quote, the rules and regulations of devotional service, as given in all scriptures, are absolutely essential. If one tries to perform Hari Bhakti, he uses the word Hari Bhakti, without following these rules, his so-called devotion will simply cause a disturbance, unquote. So, very important. However, Vamsidas Babaji was that rare Paramahamsa devotee. Now, we can also note here that sometimes these rare devotees on his level, who have no need to follow the prescribed rules and regulations, they sometimes, you could say, come down from that elevated platform in order to teach us the proper process of regulated devotional service, which is essential. In other words, they become acharyas, they become teachers, by setting the example. Just like our Srila Prabhupada. He is a topmost Paramahamsa, swan-like devotee. Another term is Uttama Adhikari. But he came down from that platform to Madhyam Adhikari, because Madhyam Adhikaris, they have realization and they're teaching others the process of devotional service. They're teaching the Kanishta Adhikaris to come up like this. So this is what Srila Prabhupada did. He was, as we know very well, he was chanting 16 rounds a day. I saw him on many occasions, myself chanting Gayatri. He would, attend devotional functions, and Prabhupada would follow all the rules and regulations, but he was doing it for our benefit because he was already fully Krishna conscious. So this is his mercy. This was his kindness. He was always transcendental, but he acted in such a way to teach us to come to that platform one day. The example is given just like when we see a teacher take a pen and he's writing A, B, C to show the student how to write. One never thinks, oh, the teacher's learning. No, he's teaching. So Vamsidas Babaji was one of those Paramahamsas whose love of God was not expressed in normal ways, as we'll see. But through him, we get a rare glimpse of a fully enlightened, unrestricted, spontaneous lover of Radha and Krishna. And just seeing that, seeing someone on that platform, will help to purify us. Studying the lives of these great devotees is not only a source of purification, but inspiration to become like them, to come to the state of unalloyed pure love for the Lord. And this is so nicely expressed by a Gopijana Bhalavadas in his famous book, Rasik Mangala. I just love that book, Rasik Mangala. And listen to what he says about hearing about pure devotees, which we've been doing for several weeks now. Quote, "The wicked age of Kali keeps one in the unlimited darkness of ignorance. The devotees who endeavor to preach are the only persons who can destroy that ignorance. Listening to the qualities of Krishna can surely help us to cross over this material world. However, listening to the glorious pastimes and qualities of a pure devotee helps one cross the three phases of time, past, present, and future, and bestows upon one love of God." Hare Krishna. So our beloved Vamsidas Babaji appeared in this world in the year 1859 in a village called Majitpur in East Bengal, again what is now Bangladesh, as we mentioned in a previous lecture. His father was a fisherman whose name was Sanatan Malabrahma, and his mother had a very beautiful name, Sarvasundari Dasi. I'm always looking for names, so there's a good name. Sarvasundari Dasi. And upon his birth, his parents named him Bhairab Chandra. Bhairab Chandra. And I was reading that they were a typical pious Hindu family who at that time were very poor. Actually, it's written they were poverty-stricken. And Bhairab Chandra grew up spending his days on the river with his father and other fishermen fishing. However, every afternoon when everyone else would go home, Bhairab Chandra would visit the local Gaur-Nitai temple in the neighboring village of Jamalpur. And there he would sit and listen to the sadhus recount the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. This is what he would do in his spare time. And it's said that such sadhus, they were often singing the songs of Srila Narottam Das Thakur. And it said that due to this sadhu sangha, which is an essential part of our tradition, as Bhairab Chandra grew into his late teens, he imbibed the spirit of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And as a result, he started showing a disinterest in worldly affairs. And when his parents noted that, they said, "We have to get him married because we don't want to lose him." So he was married, but a very short marriage. After some time, as we see is the case in a number of the personalities we've been discussing the last few months, Bhairab Chandra just packed a few essential things and he left home. He actually left behind a young wife and a 6-month-old son. But you could say for a higher purpose. To become a renunciate and to travel to holy places. And that's what sadhus do. We've been hearing, again, about the great acharyas we've been speaking about. I mean, practically everyone at some point in his life traveled to various holy places in this great country of Bharat, of India. And that's what we should do as well, when the time permits. Prabhupada was encouraging, I remember in the 70s, Prabhupada was encouraging his disciples to come to Vrindavan and to Mayapur, those two places in particular. Even he knew how much it cost and how it, you could say, temporarily suspended the preaching in the West. Prabhupada felt it was essential for our nourishing our Bhakti Lata Bij. And as we've said before, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur, he encourages this as well, to visit holy places. In his song Sudha Bhakata Charana Renu. He sings famously, Madhavatiti Bhakti Janani Jetani Palana Kori Krishna Bhashati Bhashati Boili Parama Adare Bori Gaur Amara Sesabastane Koralo Brahmana Range Sesabastana Hiribo Ami Panayi Bhakata Sange. That, quote, holy days like Ekadasi and Janmashtami are the mothers of devotion for those devotees who properly respect them. Let the holy places of Krishna's pastimes be my places of worship and bless me. May I always visit all the holy places associated with the Leelas of Lord Chaitanya and his devotees. Hare Krishna. So in his travels, Bhairab Chandra was impressed with the spiritual character of an elevated sadhu he met, whose name was Narottam Das Babaji. And in time, he took initiation from that sadhu. Not just initiation, Diksha, but also Babaji initiation. And he became, his guru gave him the name Vamsidas Babaji. Vamsidas Babaji, or as we know him sometimes, Babaji Maharaj. So after traveling far and wide, he finally settled in Navadwip, being a Gaudiya Vaisnava, where he remained actually most of his life, although he did go back and forth to Vrindavan and Navadwip. And it was soon after his travels and coming back to Navadwip that it's mentioned Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur came to hear of Vamsidas Babaji's highly exalted nature. And they arranged to have a darshan with him. Their first darshan with him was in 1903. And on that visit, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he wrote that Babaji Maharaj was very tall. He was 6 feet tall and very strongly built. And he noted that his hair and beard were always uncut, matted, and disshelved. You may have seen the photo, actually. There was one photo ever taken of him. And that photo we used as the means to advertise this lecture. You can see him. He's just sitting there with this very wild look in his eyes. He always had that wild look in his eyes. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he heard from others that Babaji Maharaj often fasted for many, many days, not even taking water. And that he often narrated leelas of the different pastimes of Krishna in Braj Mandala, and at other times he sang the glories of Navadwip Mandala. We have Braj Mandala and Navadwip Mandala. Mandala means the greater area of Vrindavan, or the greater area of Navadwip. So he was constantly narrating Krishna's pastimes and Gaura's pastimes. And it's described sometimes he madly told stories of Gaura Leela and Krishna Leela in a disjointed manner, jumping from one story to another without completing it, then coming back to the original one, and just according to the flow of his mind, or let us say the flow of his bhav, his love. It's described as sometimes he laughed, and sometimes he was just totally silent for long periods, when suddenly he would call out very loudly, Bhakata Vatsala Hari, Pran Balaba Hari, Bhakata Vatsala Hari, O Pran Balaba Hari, from the heart. And he was also famous for singing songs that he composed. Sadhus would say that these impromptu songs very often had no proper meter, no rhyme or tune or melody, but they issued from a heart that was filled with pure devotion. And thus these impromptu songs with no meter, rhyme, rhythm or melody, they were more pleasing to Krishna than many thousands of Vedic hymns. This is Paramahamsa devotee whose heart is just fully in love with Krishna. And in my research, I spent many hours actually, about Vamsidas Babaji, I learned that he rarely spoke to anyone except his deities and some intimate followers. Of course, he did speak to people from time to time, but not so often. And even when he spoke to devotees, it said that, like, if a devotee asked him a question, he would answer the question by, giving the answer to his deity. He just preferred to always be with his deities, having some relationship with his deities. So the question, and then the response he would say to his deity. And when people would approach him with offerings, let's say worldly people would sometimes come to get a benediction. It's described that he would rarely reply to them as if he was unaware of their presence. Unaware of their presence. He would acknowledge the devotees, but those who were worldly, selfish, material desirous, it's as if they did not exist for him. Although we'll see, sometimes he was compassionate and he did help them. And he was very fond of Narottam Das Thakur's songs, especially Nitai Parakamala, which he would sing every day. And the sadhus say when he would sing this song every day, he would sing it in a very beautiful melodic voice. And he especially liked the line, Nitayar Korana Hobe, Braja Radha Krishna Pabe. Quote, by the mercy of Lord Nityananda, one can attain Radha and Krishna in Braj. And I also read that Vamsidas Babaji Maharaj, he saw everything in a Krishna conscious way. And I thought to share with you one example. He might hear someone say the word government, and he would smile and he'd exclaim very loudly, oh yes, Govardhan Dari. He's just fully surrendered. Government, Govardhan. Yes, Govardhan Dari. Now, when he was in Bengal, Vamsidas Babaji mostly stayed in Navadwip in a tiny cottage, well, not even a cottage, a bhajan kutir made from mud and straw. And he lived with his deities. He had Gaurnitai deities, Radha Govinda deities, and he had a Balagopal deity. And his whole life was simply to be with his deities. He would talk to them day and night, and he was hardly aware of anything else. And his only possessions were his deities, 2 pairs of kopans, and some small items that you could fit in the palm of your hands. And he was especially attached to his Gopal deity, whom he carried everywhere in his right hand. If he would leave his kutir to go here or there, he would walk with his Gopal in his hand, and he was talking to him. And he worshipped his deities in his own way. Again, there was no need for a formal system of worship to establish a relationship with the deity and to, through that association, develop love for the deity, who's not different than Krishna. He was already fully in love with the deities, and the deities were fully in love with him. There was no formal system of worship. Mainly he just cooked for them. And he offered them flowers that he collected every day around noon. He'd offer food to his deities without mantras or ringing bells. Basically, he just would cook the food and he'd give it to them. And the relationship was so spontaneous. Just, again, think of Goloka Vrindavan with Mother Yashoda. She'll feed Krishna, but if he's naughty, maybe she'd send him to bed without supper. Their loving relationship. So sometimes he would feed his deities and sometimes he didn't. He never put his deities to sleep, and he never woke them up. His mode of worship was simply to see his deities, to live with them, and to talk with them. Well, sometimes laughing and sometimes quarreling with them. I remember one time Babaji Maharaj asked his servant's name was Ananta Vishwambara Das. Ananta Vishwambara Das. He said to his servant, Ananta, did you hear what Gauranga was saying? Referring to his deity of Gauranga. And Ananta replied, Babaji, I could see you were talking to him, but I couldn't hear what he was saying to you. So Vamsidas Babaji, he said, oh, he has told me, Vamsidas, don't go outside for begging anymore. Now you have become too old. So I, Gauranga, will feed you. Unquote. So then Vamsidas Babaji said, this Gauranga, Ananta, to a servant, this Gauranga, he wants to serve me. Then he ran out and he got a stick and he came back in and he threatened his Gauranga deity with the stick, saying, you don't go outside for serving me. If you go outside, I'll break your leg. So, whoa, he took a stick. But remember, Mother Yashoda also took a stick when Krishna stole the yogurt, broke the pots, fed it to the monkeys. Oof. So he was on the level of Paramahamsa, swan-like devotee. So when he was speaking to his deities, sometimes he would stop speaking as if to listen to what they were saying, and then he would again go on talking. And he would ask his deities questions like, so did you take your food? How did you find it? Did you like it? Was it okay? And once when Babaji Maharaj was cooking alone in the kitchen, his followers overheard him because he had especially Gopal, he took him everywhere. So the deities are in the kitchen, he's cooking for them, and like you might take your child and put it nearby and cook for them. So his deities are in the kitchen, and he was alone with them, and the devotees outside there heard him say, just wait, you all, I'm still cooking. And then a few minutes later, all right, that's enough. Now you all go outside. You just get outside until I'm finished. My dear Lord, you are not a statue. You are directly the son of Maharaj Nanda. And let us remember Prabhupada's statement. Quote, if you think this deity is a brass-made idol, then it will remain a brass-made idol to you forever. But if you elevate yourself to a higher platform of Krishna consciousness, then Krishna, this Krishna, will talk to you. This Krishna will talk to you. There is a Vamsidas Babaji Maharaj. He was talking with his deity. It seems Prabhupada was aware of these pastimes of this great devotee. Now, Vamsidas Babaji's Gaur Nitai were also very, very dear to him. He had a special relationship with them. It's described that if anything good happened, he would give the credit. Oh, so you have arranged? Thakurji has arranged. But if something bad happened, he also put the blame on them. In other words, something bad happened, but they didn't, stop it. They could have stopped it, but they didn't. So there's a nice pastime in this regard. Once, two brass pots were stolen from his bhajan kutir. He would use these two pots for cooking. And to punish Gaur Nitai for allowing that to happen, quote unquote, Vamsidas Babaji chastised them and didn't feed them that day. They allowed the pots to be stolen. And the next day, someone kindly came forward and donated one pot to him. So Babaji Maharaj said, this pot shall be Nitai's. So today he will get food. If Gora is to eat, he must bring his own pot. And that day he cooked and fed Lord Nityananda, but he didn't feed Gauranga. Spontaneous, loving, devotional service on the transcendental platform. We can't imitate, but we can follow in the footsteps of such devotees by very nicely serving our deities according to all the rules and regulations, because we know from our acharyas that those rules and regulations give great pleasure to the deities. So we're on the right path. Now, as I've mentioned several times, he would travel with Gopal in his hand wherever he went, and when traveling long distances, his servants would wrap up his other deities in a cloth and carry them very respectfully in a basket. And while traveling, on a bullock cart or in a boat or on foot, Vamsidas Babaji would go on and on and on talking to Gopal. So in these ways, he worshipped Krishna with not with formal rituals, but from within his heart, as devotees on that level do. Now, like Jagannath Das Babaji, whom we spoke about in our previous lecture, Vamsidas Babaji spent time in both Navadwip and Braj. But while in Braj, his habit was to simply sit down in selected holy places, just sit there and cook for his deities and talk to them. He didn't do like, we often hear, we go to Vrindavan and, the devotees, they go through the 12 forests and they'll visit here and they'll visit there, like that. But, because say like the 6 Goswamis, he preferred to sit down and do his bhajan in one place, or a number of places, but basically sit down for many days. Especially he liked to sit under banyan trees and do his cooking, his talking with his deities. And for an example, I read the diary of one of his servants who wrote about a particular visit to Vrindavan. And I quote the diary. We thank that devotee for keeping a diary. Quote, "Today, on March 22nd, Babaji Maharaj spent 2 days sitting on the eastern side of Vishramghat, speaking to his deities. Then he entered Vrindavan village and remained in one place for 9 days, cooking every day for his deities. Then he resided for 3 days under a neem tree near the temple of Lala Babu." Many of us know that temple of Lala Babu because it's one of our meeting points during our Kartik Parikramas to start our Parikrama for the day. Next, he took up residence for 8 days under a tamal tree. Then he shifted to a kadamba tree on the banks of Mansarovara. Then he moved for 1 day next to the Govinda temple and lived under a tree there. Then for 2 days, he lived in front of a samadhi at Kaliagat, and he went on to, mention numerous places that Babaji Maharaj would stay and just relish the dham, cooking for his deities and having discussions with them. And he concluded that particular passage of the diary in a very interesting way. He said, quote, "Not noticing the hardships of such a way of life, Babaji Maharaj remained happy in love of Krishna, whom he carried with him everywhere as his inseparable companion and friend," unquote. So sweet. Now, Vamsidas Babaji would also sometimes travel to Jagannath Puri, it's said, to see Lord Jagannath. And one time during the Rath Yatra parade, when the chariot of Lord Jagannath was passing by him on the main road, where he was standing, the chariot just came to an abrupt halt. It just stopped. And everyone was like, what's happening? It was going so nicely. There was no hole in the road, no obstacle. It just came to a very abrupt stop. So more people were called to come forward and pull on the ropes, but the Rath cart wouldn't move. And then eventually they brought elephants. The elephants couldn't move it. Couldn't budge the cart. So it's written down. It's there in the annals of the scribes that Babaji Maharaj, he came forward and he came in front of the cart and, quote, he had some intimate, very intimate conversations with Lord Jagannath. And when Lord Jagannath was satisfied with his time spent with this beloved devotee, the cart moved again. This is the intimate relationship between pure devotees and deities. It just serves to have our to increase our faith in the Archa Vigraha, the installed form of the Lord. Archa Vigraha is, you could say, it's that form, that presence of the Lord is one of his most merciful forms, the deity, because Krishna comes and Krishna goes. But deities, there are some deities on this planet that have been worshipped since Satya Yuga. So the very merciful form of the Lord. And this was the great gift that Srila Prabhupada, one of the great gifts that Prabhupada introduced to the Western society, Western culture. One might think, oh, how are people in the West going to accept deity worship? They'll think it's idol worship. But you can see it's become very popular by the mercy of the deities. So these pastimes, I'm hoping that by sharing these pastimes with you, your faith in your worshipable deities, Brandane, will increase more, and your worship of them will become more pakka, as Prabhupada has taught us. So I was reading that whenever he traveled to Vrindavan and Navadwip and Puri, some people were allowed to come up to him and ask some questions. Sometimes he was in that mood, rarely, but sometimes he would give darshan. And I was reading an interesting darshan that he had. One time a person managed to ask him, Babaji, can you give me a clear definition? What is religion? So Babaji Maharaj replied, Jive Daya Namuruchi Vaisnava Shevana Iha Chara Dharma Nahi Shuna Shanatana. Hear, Sanatan, kindness to all living beings, taste for the holy names, and service to Vaishnavas. Apart from these, there is no other religion. Hear, Sanatan, kindness to all living beings, taste for the holy name, and service to Vaishnavas. Apart from these, there is no other religion. So, when I heard about that verse, I looked it up. I looked for it in Shastra. I didn't find it in Chaitanya Charitamrita, that specific verse. I didn't find it in Chaitanya Bhagavad or Bhakti Ratnakara or Narottam Vilas. And I consulted with my friends in the GPC Shastra committee, and they said there's no reference for that verse in Shastra, but it's a very common Bengali saying. And Prabhupada did sometimes, repeat Bengali sayings that were appropriate for the time, place, and the circumstance. So because Babaji Maharaj, Vamsidas Babaji, quoted that, I've included it in the lecture today. It's very beautiful. Jive Daya Nam Uruchi Vaishnav Sevana Iha Chara Dharma Nahi Shuna Shanatan. Hear, Sanatan, kindness to all living beings, taste for the holy names, and service to Vaishnavas. Apart from these, there's no other religion. Another time a person came to Babaji Maharaj who was really going through a lot of difficulties. He was struggling in his life. And he asked Babaji Maharaj how to become free from all these problems. So Babaji Maharaj, I remember again from his childhood, he was hearing the songs and the poems of Narottam Das Thakur. He loved them, just like our Prabhupada. He very much appreciated the songs of Srila Narottam Das Thakur. He would quote them and he would sing them. So on this particular occasion, Babaji Maharaj quoted Narottam Das Thakur from Prem Bhakti Chandrika, how to solve the problems of life. Apani palabe shaba sunya gobindaraha rabba simharabe janikari jana. Quote, all troubles go away by hearing the sound vibration of Govinda's name, just as a deer flees upon hearing the roar of a lion. One who performs unalloyed devotional service will feel great happiness, and all his problems will be vanquished. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Be gone with you, all problems. Be gone. So, another pastime, excuse me. I've been speaking all day, various Zoom conferences and to different devotees and different committees. And it's actually evening here. So one night in his travels, Babaji Maharaj camped with a few of his followers in a very remote forest on the banks of the Vaitarani River, very dense forested area. And it was a full moon night, so he said there was no need for his servants to put any tent up for him. He just, it's a full moon, it's a beautiful evening, so there's no need for a tent. And I was reading that evening as the moon rays were shining, reflecting on the sand of the river, 50 very beautiful, effulgent ladies, all dressed in pristine white clothes, 50 of them. They just came through the forest, just moved very swiftly through the forest. And they came and they very quickly offered obeisances to Babaji Maharaj, and they quickly left. Like, all the followers are like, wow, what was that? Where did these ladies come from? So the next day, Babaji Maharaj and his followers, they traveled, a great distance out of this forest, and they came across a village. And upon arriving, they asked the local people if those ladies were from their village. And the villagers replied, we don't go into that forest. It's very dense, and it's quite some distance away, and there's wild animals, etc. So no one goes there, men or women. And they said, it's such a remote location. Why would we go there? And so they couldn't. No one knew where these ladies had come from, and it was kind of the talk as they traveled on. That Babaji Maharaj's followers were saying, like, where do they? In the middle of nowhere. So sometime later, Babaji Maharaj, he revealed to them that these mysterious ladies were in fact demigoddesses from Swargaloka, who had come to very quickly, respectfully offer their respects to him and then go back to their heavenly abodes. And we hear how sometimes the residents of Swargaloka, they come to this earthly planet when there's, especially when there's yajnas. And so, even in Kali Yuga, sometimes the denizens of heaven, they come when there's the Yuga Dharma, the Sankirtan movement, especially where there's the loud chanting of Krishna's holy names, or there's profuse distribution of Srila Prabhupada's books, or there's big festivals. Sometimes they come incognito, and they're present. So, Vamsidas Babaji, I was reading, he always remained very humble. Even though he was so much adored and glorified, he actually wouldn't listen to all that glorification. But sometimes he would unknowingly reveal his higher nature. For example, one time he was going to collect some water with a clay pot from the Ganges. And he was walking alone, but he didn't know that little distance behind his servant was following him just in case. But as far as he knew, he was alone. And suddenly he slipped on the muddy banks of the Ganges, and he fell down. And it's described his servant smiled when he heard from a distance Babaji Maharaj say to someone, no, now you go ahead. You go and bring water for washing baby Krishna. You go ahead and bring the water for washing baby Krishna. Who was this personality? And one time on Gaur Purnima, the appearance day of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it's coming up soon actually, a a lot of people came to have his darshan. And he was liberal, I heard, on that day. On Gaur Purnima, he was more liberal, and he gave his association. So a lot of donations were collected. And again, his servant, Ananta for short, he collected that Lakshmi, and he was thinking, wow, tomorrow I'll hold a big event, and with this money, we'll prepare nice foodstuffs and serve it to all the pilgrims who've come. Nice prasad. But that day, it was the day of Gaur Purnima, somebody stole all the money. And Ananta Vishwambari, who was lamenting, greatly lamenting that the money had been taken because he wanted to serve the Vaishnavas. But Vamsidas Babaji said, why are you lamenting? Mahaprabhu has given it to somebody else. That's how he saw everything. As Krishna, he saw that Mahaprabhu is, given it to somebody else for whatever reason. And that may have been the pastime that Prabhupada was referring to. And remember at the beginning of the lecture, we mentioned how some money was stolen from Babaji Maharaj's servant, and Prabhupada was quoting Babaji Maharaj. And so then at the end, Vamsidas Babaji, he said to Ananta, when you shave, your hair goes away. But after some time, it comes back again. And the same way, money comes, money goes. So don't be attached or disappointed. Let's see. It's getting a little late here. On another occasion, a young, very pious young girl, I think she was described as 8 years old, she brought a pot of Ganges water for Babaji Maharaj to his bhajan, kutir, during a big storm, like an electrical storm. A big storm was out there. And, she just stepped once into his bhajan kutir, put the pot down, and turned around to step out. And when she came in, Babaji Maharaj was like in samadhi. He was singing a song to his Gopal deity. But just as that little girl was about to step out, he came out of his samadhi. He said, "Don't take another step, young lady." She froze. At that very moment, a bolt of lightning came down by nature's way and hit the very spot that she was about to step in. So she went, whoa. And then he said, "Now you can go." So she left. And he went back into his samadhi, glorifying his Gopal. So how is this possible? He was totally in another world, but these great devotees are on a different plane than we are. And he was able to somehow perceive this incident was going to happen, and he saved that little girl's life, that little Vaishnavi. Let's see, what else was there? Oh yeah, once a man was suffering from cholera. He got cholera. It was quite advanced. So it was the last recourse before he died. He came and he laid outside the bhajan kutir of Vamsidas Babaji. And he was moaning, "I would rather die than bear this pain that's in my stomach because of the cholera. I just want to die." And he was hoping that Vamsidas Babaji, being a sadhu, sadhus have compassion, he would heal him. But he ended up laying there for 3 or 4 days without food or drink. And finally, Vamsidas Babaji became compassionate, and he came out. And witnesses say he put a single tulsi leaf onto the tongue of that severely ill person, and he cured him immediately. The cholera went away, the fever went away. There was no more pain. He stood up, he bowed down before Babaji, and he left. So these are some miracles. Miracle means something that contradicts the laws of material nature. But these devotees are not controlled by the laws of material nature. And like Krishna, they can do things that seem miraculous to us. Now, whenever Vamsidas Babaji was in Navadwip, which from my understanding is where he spent most of his time, our beloved Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, every day he would arrange firewood because, as we hear, Vamsidas Babaji liked to cook for his deities. So every day, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati would arrange firewood and any other simple, provisions that Babaji might need. And he sent them daily with 2 or 3 disciples on bicycles. And they would come to whoever Babaji Maharaj's bhajan kutir was, and they would deliver these items. Now I was reading, sometimes Vamsidas Babaji would welcome them and thank you very much. Other times, he would take those gifts and he'd become very angry and he'd throw them in the river, throw them in the Ganges. And he'd shout at those devotees, "Who do you think you people are anyway? Do you think you need to bring things for me? Don't you understand? My Prabhu will send whatever I need." I thought of the verse in Gita, Yogakshemam Bahamiham, for my devotee. Protect what he has and I provide whatever he needs. And sometimes devotees, they think, yeah, but but if you're on the level, if you've surrendered, if you've given up all selfish desires and you're just serving Krishna, serving Guru and Gauranga, we'll see. Krishna will protect what you have and he'll provide what you need, as he did for our beloved Srila Prabhupada. But when this happened, these brahmacharis, they would get like bewildered. He's screaming at us. We're bringing these things, he's throwing them in the river. So after sometimes they became a little critical of Babaji Maharaj. Remember, they were warned. Earlier we mentioned in the lecture that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he could understand his neophyte disciples would not be able to appreciate this unorthodox behavior of Vamsidas Babaji, so he would warn them. So when he heard that these brahmacharis were criticizing this transcendental mood of Vamsidas Babaji, he called them in and he chastised them and warned them that they just didn't understand his exalted position and they should go, fall flat at his lotus feet, express remorse and ask for forgiveness, which they did. So when I read this, I remembered a aphorism in Vedanta Sutra. Where does it go? Bhavagrahi Janardan. I read it just last week. Bhavagrahi Janardan. Bhavagrahi Janardan means, quote, the Lord accepts the essence of a devotee's attitude and inner mood rather than his external actions. Of course, we're speaking about pure devotees here. Ourselves, our inner mood and our actions, they have to be always proper according to the rules and regulations of devotional service. But for these devotees, these Paramahamsas, the Lord accepts the essence of such a devotee's attitude and inner mood rather than his external actions. Bhavagrahi Janardana. I think we've explained this sufficiently in this lecture. So this is the part I always don't look forward to this part of the lecture. When speaking about these great devotees who are the source of all of our all auspiciousness in our lives, because this auspiciousness is passed down from the Adi Guru, from the original Guru Krishna, from one acharya to another down through the ages. And as they touch this mercy, it becomes even more profound. And we came in contact with that mercy through the blessings of Srila Prabhupada, all of us. So it's hard to talk about their departure from this world. But it must be said that Srila Vamsidas Babaji Maharaj concluded his pastimes in this world and went to Goloka Vrindavan to continue his unique service to Lord Krishna there, to Radha and Krishna, at 8 p.m. on July 23rd, 1944, which was the disappearance day of Srila Raghunandana Thakur. I don't know what else to say. I think it would be appropriate today to conclude with a beautiful poem glorifying Vamsidas Babaji, composed by that devotee, Jati Shekhara Das, that disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur. We mentioned in the beginning that he wrote a booklet about Babaji Maharaj, because he spent a lot of time with him. He traveled with him, and he assisted Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, I think, in delivering some of those items to Babaji Maharaj on a daily basis. At his kutir, of course, he had full faith in Babaji Maharaj. So he wrote a poem. It's a short poem, but it's, again, eloquence is truth spoken concisely. Let us just open our hearts and hear from this devotee who had so much love for Vamsidas Babaji, and pray that we can also awaken our appreciation, which turns into affection, which turns into love for such a great devotee. And we as modern day Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis in this world can carry on this wonderful tradition of Krishna consciousness, which is practiced in so many different unique ways by different types of devotees here and in the spiritual world as well. So please allow me. This poem is entitled Bhakata Vatsala Hari. Bhakata Vatsala Hari. We heard that a few times during the lecture today. So there's only six verses. Sometimes Vamsidas calls out on the bank of the Jamuna, Krishna Chandra, in a faltering voice. When he calls out loudly, Bhakata Vatsala Hari, that sound echoes within his heart and makes him tremble. Sometimes he calls out on the edge of Navadwip. That sound takes the form of ecstatic feelings for Krishna. How Vamsidas is filled with affection as he calls out, Bhakata Vatsala Hari, Bhakata Vatsala Hari. On the edge of the seashore, on the paths into Nilachala, Vamsidas raises his arms and calls out to Lord Jagannath on his Ratha Yatra cart. Bhakata Vatsala Hari exists only for the sake of his devotees. And his devotee, Vamsidas, is now and forever everything to me. Hare Krishna. We thank that wonderful devotee, Jati Shekhar, for composing that poem and for whatever information he shared with us about the life of Babaji Maharaj. Prabhus, thank you so much. Again, I cherish this service because, well, it's a service to all of you. And that's the way we make advancement in Krishna consciousness. Hari Guru Vaishnav Bhagavata Gita. So I'll continue with my research. I've got a couple more acharyas to speak on. And then we'll go back to speaking about Radha and Krishna's, the cowherd boys, and all the devotees, pastimes in Sri Vrindavan Dham. Maybe got a few more weeks like that. And then we will move on to discussing the pastimes of Sri Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Nityananda, Panchatattva, in the glorious land of Navadwip, Mayapur Dham. So take your leave. It's getting a bit late here, and we'll see you in a few days. Thank you. Shri Shri Gauranitai ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundar ki, Vrindavaneshwari Shrimati Radharani ki, Shri Prabhupada ki, Shri Vamsidas Babaji ki, Navadvip Mayapur Dham ki, Vrindavan Dham ki, back home, back to Godhead ki, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur ki, Shri Prabhupada ki, Jai Jai Sri Sri Radhe Shyam.